Have you ever noticed that the faster you chase a man after he ignores you, the colder he becomes? The more explanations you send, the less emotional urgency he feels. And most women never realize they are accidentally teaching him that he can disappear without consequences. But here is the surprising part. The women who regain a man's attention are usually not the loudest, the most emotional, or the most available. They are the women who know exactly what to do the moment the silence begins. And once you understand this shift, you stop feeling powerless completely. Think about this for a second. Have you ever promised yourself you would stay calm when a man pulled away, but the silence slowly consumed your thoughts anyway? Have you ever checked your phone repeatedly, replayed conversations in your head, or felt your confidence collapse because one person suddenly changed their energy toward you? If you have, then this conversation is going to change the way you handle attraction forever. The moment a man starts ignoring a woman, something emotional usually happens inside her almost instantly. Her mind begins searching for answers, her emotions become unsettled, and without even realizing it, she often starts reacting from fear instead of confidence. What makes this dangerous is that most women believe chasing harder will create closeness again. They think more attention, more messages, or more emotional effort will remind him of their value. But in reality, the opposite often happens. The more emotionally available someone becomes during moments of distance, the less urgency the other person feels to reconnect. This is why the cold shock matters so much. It forces people to confront a truth they usually avoid. Attraction rarely grows when someone feels emotionally cornered. When a man senses panic, emotional pressure, or desperation, he unconsciously relaxes because he no longer fears losing the connection. Human psychology works strangely this way. People naturally value what feels emotionally balanced and difficult to control completely. The second someone feels guaranteed, no matter how poorly they behave, their motivation often decreases. Many women do not notice how quickly emotional chasing changes the dynamic. One extra message may not seem important, but emotionally it communicates something much deeper. It says, "Your silence is affecting my emotional stability." Once that energy appears repeatedly, the interaction slowly becomes less attractive and more emotionally heavy. Instead of curiosity, there is pressure. Instead of excitement, there is emotional responsibility. Most people pull away from emotional pressure, even if they originally liked the person. Another important part of this is emotional self-respect. When someone ignores you and your immediate reaction is to overextend yourself emotionally, you unintentionally teach them that your attention has no boundaries. This creates an unhealthy imbalance where one person controls the emotional direction of the relationship while the other constantly reacts to it. Strong emotional energy does not come from pretending not to care. It comes from staying grounded even when uncertainty appears. Calmness creates mystery because it shows that your identity is not collapsing over someone else's temporary behavior. And strangely enough, that emotional steadiness often creates far more attraction than emotional pursuit ever could. Most people think attraction grows through constant reassurance, constant communication, and constant availability. But what many fail to understand is that emotional attraction often becomes strongest when someone feels free instead of emotionally pressured. This is why the women who regain a man's attention are rarely the ones reacting dramatically or emotionally chasing after him. They are usually the women who understand emotional timing, emotional control, and the power of calm confidence. When a man begins pulling away or acting distant, many women immediately feel the need to fix the situation. They want clarity right away because uncertainty feels uncomfortable. So they start sending longer messages, asking emotional questions, or trying harder to hold his attention. The problem is that this behavior usually comes from fear of losing him rather than genuine confidence. And people can feel the difference immediately. A woman who becomes emotionally reactive during silence unintentionally communicates insecurity. Even if her words sound calm, the emotional energy underneath often says, "I need reassurance from you in order to feel okay." That pressure changes the emotional atmosphere completely. Instead of feeling curiosity or excitement, the man begins feeling responsibility for her emotional state. Attraction weakens when someone feels emotionally trapped or overly needed too early. The women who quietly regain attention understand something deeper. They understand that emotional steadiness creates curiosity. When a woman does not panic during distance, she communicates strength without needing to announce it. Her calmness sends a message that says, "My emotional stability does not disappear because of temporary silence." That energy feels rare because most people react impulsively when they feel ignored. There is also an important psychological shift that happens when someone stops chasing. The absence of pressure gives the other person room to think, room to notice the distance, and room to wonder about the connection naturally. Human beings often become more aware of someone's value when that person is no longer emotionally overextending themselves for attention. This does not mean becoming cold, manipulative, or pretending not to care. It means understanding that self-respect is attractive. Emotional control is attractive. A life that remains full and grounded even when someone pulls away is attractive. And in many cases, that emotional independence becomes the exact thing that makes a man emotionally re-engage, because he starts feeling the possibility of losing access to that energy altogether. Almost everyone believes they will stay calm when someone they care about suddenly becomes distant. They imagine themselves reacting with confidence, patience, and emotional control. But when the silence actually happens, the emotional experience feels completely different. A delayed reply suddenly feels personal. A change in tone becomes something the mind obsessively analyzes. And before long, the person who once felt emotionally secure begins questioning their value, their attractiveness, and even the entire connection itself. What makes this situation emotionally intense is not only the silence itself, it is the uncertainty attached to it. Human beings naturally struggle with emotional ambiguity because the mind wants answers. When someone's behavior changes unexpectedly, the brain immediately starts trying to close the emotional gap by creating explanations. This is why people replay conversations repeatedly in their heads, searching for hidden mistakes or signs they may have missed earlier. Many women do not even realize how quickly this emotional spiral begins. They may casually check their phone once, then again 5 minutes later, then again 10 minutes later. Eventually, their emotional state becomes controlled by whether or not a notification appears. The dangerous part is that this creates emotional dependency without them noticing it. Their peace slowly becomes connected to another person's attention. This emotional pattern is incredibly common because people often attach their sense of worth to consistency from others. When attention suddenly disappears, it can feel like personal rejection instead of temporary distance. The mind begins creating painful assumptions such as, maybe I am not important enough, or maybe he lost interest because I was not enough. In reality, silence does not always reveal your value. Sometimes it reveals another person's confusion, emotional immaturity, inconsistency, or inability to communicate properly. Emotionally strong people learn something important during these moments. They learn that anxiety creates distorted thinking. When emotions become intense, the mind exaggerates problems that may not even exist yet. This is why reacting impulsively during emotional uncertainty often creates regret later. The key shift happens when someone stops allowing silence to control their identity. The moment you realize your confidence should not rise and fall based on another person's temporary behavior, your emotional energy changes completely. Instead of becoming consumed by fear, you begin observing the situation with clarity, and that emotional stability immediately makes you stronger, calmer, and far more attractive than panic ever could. One of the biggest mistakes people make when they feel ignored is continuing to reward the behavior with unlimited emotional access. The moment a man becomes distant, many women immediately increase their emotional effort instead of reducing it. They send more messages, give more reassurance, become more available, and try harder to maintain the connection. What they fail to realize is that this teaches him something powerful without words. It teaches him that he can withdraw attention while still receiving full emotional investment in return. Human behavior naturally responds to consequences and emotional patterns. When someone feels they can disappear emotionally without losing your attention, your time, or your emotional energy, there is very little motivation for them to change their behavior. This is not about manipulation or punishment. It is about emotional balance. Healthy attraction requires mutual effort, mutual curiosity, and mutual respect. When one person continues overgiving during emotional distance, the balance begins collapsing. Most women do this because silence creates anxiety. They believe that if they just explain themselves better, love harder, or stay more emotionally available, the connection will return to normal. But emotional over-pursuit usually creates the opposite effect. Instead of feeling drawn back toward you, the man begins feeling emotionally crowded. The relationship energy becomes centered around pressure instead of natural connection. What makes emotional chasing especially damaging is that it slowly lowers perceived value. People often appreciate what feels emotionally stable and self-respecting. But when someone repeatedly abandons their own dignity just to maintain attention, the interaction starts feeling less special. The emotional dynamic shifts from mutual attraction into emotional dependence. This is why emotional restraint becomes incredibly important. Pulling your energy back does not mean becoming cruel, cold, or emotionally unavailable. It means refusing to reward inconsistency with deeper emotional investment. It means recognizing that your attention is valuable and should not be endlessly handed to someone showing minimal effort in return. Calm distance often creates more clarity than emotional pursuit ever could. A man who genuinely values you will notice the emotional shift when your energy is no longer constantly available. He will feel the difference between someone emotionally chasing him and someone emotionally grounded within themselves. And if he does not notice, that information becomes valuable too, because it reveals whether he was truly interested in building something meaningful or simply comfortable receiving attention without responsibility. The moment a woman becomes emotionally consumed by a man's inconsistent behavior, her entire world can slowly begin revolving around his attention without her realizing it. Her mood depends on whether he texts back. Her confidence rises and falls based on his energy. Her focus shifts away from her own goals, routines, friendships, and emotional well-being. This is why bringing your focus back to yourself immediately becomes one of the most powerful things you can do when a man starts ignoring you. Many people mistakenly think this is about playing games or pretending not to care. It is not. It is about reconnecting with your own emotional center before someone else's behavior completely controls your state of mind. The problem with obsession is that it quietly drains your confidence. The more you focus on someone pulling away, the more emotionally small and powerless you begin to feel. Your thoughts become repetitive, your emotions become unstable, and your sense of identity slowly becomes tied to one person's attention. Emotionally grounded women interrupt this pattern quickly. Instead of sitting endlessly with anxiety, they redirect their energy into things that strengthen them mentally and emotionally. They return to neglected goals, reconnect with supportive people, focus on physical health, improve routines, and continue building a life that feels meaningful outside of romantic validation. This shift is important because confidence does not grow from receiving attention. Real confidence grows from maintaining connection with yourself, regardless of who enters or exits your life. Ironically, this emotional independence often changes the dynamic completely. When someone senses that your life does not emotionally stop because they became distant, they begin viewing you differently. Your energy feels calmer, more balanced, and more valuable because it no longer carries desperation. People are naturally drawn toward individuals who seem emotionally fulfilled within themselves, instead of emotionally dependent on external reassurance. There is also another powerful reason this matters. Focusing on yourself restores clarity. When you stop obsessing over his silence every minute, you begin seeing the situation more realistically. You stop romanticizing inconsistency. You stop excusing disrespect. You stop confusing emotional anxiety with deep connection. And whether the relationship survives or not, you protect the most important thing in the process, which is your emotional stability. Because no relationship should require you to abandon your peace, your dignity, or your identity just to feel temporarily wanted. One of the most common reactions people have when someone starts ignoring them is the immediate need for answers. The silence feels uncomfortable, so they try to remove the uncertainty as quickly as possible. They ask questions like, "Why are you acting different? Did I do something wrong?" Or, "Are you losing interest?" On the surface, these questions seem reasonable, but emotionally, they often come from fear rather than confidence. And when fear becomes the emotional foundation of communication, attraction usually weakens instead of growing stronger. The reason this happens is because emotional pressure changes the atmosphere between two people. A man who feels emotionally interrogated during moments of distance often becomes even more withdrawn. Instead of naturally moving closer again, he starts associating the interaction with stress, responsibility, or emotional heaviness. Even if he originally needed space only temporarily, constant demands for clarity can make him feel trapped rather than understood. Most people ask for answers too quickly because uncertainty triggers anxiety. The human mind dislikes not knowing where it stands emotionally. Silence creates room for assumptions, overthinking, and insecurity. So the instinct is to force certainty immediately in order to calm the emotional discomfort. But attraction does not usually thrive under emotional urgency. It thrives when both people feel emotionally free rather than emotionally cornered. There is also another important psychological factor involved. When someone always fills silence with pursuit, the other person never experiences the emotional impact of your absence. They never have the opportunity to wonder about you, miss your presence, or feel the shift created when your energy is no longer constantly available. Human beings often recognize value more deeply when they feel the possibility of losing access to something meaningful. This does not mean you should tolerate confusion forever or accept unhealthy behavior endlessly. Emotional patience is not weakness. It simply means refusing to react impulsively during temporary uncertainty. Strong emotional energy comes from observing behavior calmly before demanding explanations emotionally. Many women unintentionally sabotage attraction by trying to force emotional clarity too soon. They believe immediate answers will create security, but forced reassurance rarely creates genuine connection. Real emotional consistency reveals itself naturally over time through actions, effort, and behavior patterns. And when you remain calm instead of emotionally rushing for certainty, you communicate something powerful without words. You communicate that your peace does not collapse simply because someone temporarily became distant, and that level of emotional control instantly changes the entire dynamic. In the end, the moment a man ignores you is not just a test of the connection. It is a test of your emotional strength, your self-respect, and your ability to remain grounded when uncertainty appears. Most people react from fear. They chase, overthink, seek reassurance, and slowly lose themselves trying to hold on to someone else's attention. But the women who create real emotional impact understand something different. They understand that their value does not decrease because someone became distant for a moment. The truth is, you should never have to beg for consistency, clarity, or basic respect. Real connection does not leave you constantly anxious about where you stand. Real attraction grows when two people willingly choose each other, not when one person is emotionally exhausting themselves trying to keep the other interested. So if a man ignores you, do not immediately panic. Do not rush to prove your worth. Bring your focus back to yourself, protect your peace, and allow his actions to reveal his true intentions naturally. Because the strongest energy you can carry is the quiet confidence that knows your happiness, your identity, and your emotional stability are far too valuable to place entirely in someone else's hands.